Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain and welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about ideal worlds. And the reason why I want to talk to you guys about this is because I've received a little bit of feedback at various times where me going, it's just a case of education, it's just a case of discussion, it's just a case of you paying attention to you and working on yourself. You know, me saying these things that to me, fairly simple. I realise that there may be some work involved, but they're fairly simple things to do, really. But then I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, well, in an ideal world that would work, but it won't work in the real world." And they don't seem to realise that an awful lot of what I do is the real world. I go out and I meet people, I go out and talk to people, and most of the work that I've done, both now and in the past, has been rather unsurprisingly in the real world, because that's where I live. And the thing that occurs to me is that whenever someone has come and thrown this in my direction, it's because they don't want to analyse themselves. It's an excuse for them to suggest that they're living in a real world. And as a result, because they live in a real world and not this ideal world, this fantasy world that they want to consign what I'm saying to, it means that therefore they can remove themselves from any kind of attachment to what I'm saying and they can just deal with it. It's really interesting to hear this from people and to see this on a regular basis, because when I've said in various videos, some of the easiest things that people can do are have discussions and leave each other alone as long as they are not harming anyone and working within the law. You know, I've had people come to me and say, "Yeah, but that would only happen in an ideal world." And I'm like, I'm asking people to talk, which people do anyway, but I'm just asking them to maybe talk at a slightly lower volume or whilst actually listening to the other person that they're talking to, which, you know, our bodies are designed for, shouldn't be that hard to do, or leaving each other alone. I'm actively asking people to do less, to not do as much to each other. How is that a hardship? It requires a lower expenditure of energy, less involvement, less stress, less time. I don't understand how that's an unrealistic thing. How that can be consigned to an ideal world, and yet actively going out and pushing yourself into other people's lives and causing all manner of hardship and damage by impressing your ideology on them or your religion on them, or you know, whatever else that it is that you want to put across to people because you're right and they're not. I don't understand how not doing that is unrealistic when it requires people to do less, you know. And so, you know, on this topic of ideal worlds, ideal worlds are fascinating and useful things because they are fantastical. You can use them as a means by which to plan out stuff that you would like to see. You know, in a perfect world, these numbers are correct for the equations that we're doing, and as a result we can use those as part of a working model to create a rocket ship or something like that. You know, that's a useful and interesting way in which ideal worlds then can be directly applied back to the real world. You know, assuming that gravity is some kind of constant on Earth, and then applying that in a very specific kind of way as a very specific number that is quite a well-rounded number for kids to learn science, when it is actually a much more lengthy number and can arguably vary depending on, you know, which piece of research you're looking at the time. You know, it's a case of kind of that application of a perfect world scenario to a problem that has allowed for the real world scenario, the real world advancement to be worked out. So if what I'm saying in regards to communicating with people and educating people and dealing with them and dealing with yourself, if all of that is in some way fantastical, then firstly, the real world must be so much more mundane on all manner of different levels, but also it stands to reason that I'm making useful suggestions, or I'm taking cases that I have worked with, or examples that I have worked with, or things that I have talked out with people, and I'm bringing them to you guys. In which case, if these things are all ideal world situations, well, fine, take that if you wish, but that doesn't mean that what I'm saying is in any way invalid. It just means that maybe you feel that it would take more kind of work to put in place. But if it's something that's still a good idea, then let's find a way to action it. Let's put a thing in place. Let's do the work to get it somewhere. People who are saying these things, or any idea that they say is fantastical, or in an ideal world that would be the case, but it's not. Either, in some cases they are literally going, well, here's the evidence why that can't work in the real world, but in an ideal world it would, or they're deliberately dismissing it because they can't be bothered. They can't be bothered to deal with it themselves. They can't be bothered to see it happen in the real world. And often, in some instances, where it's in an ideal world that would happen, but it won't. It's because they don't want it to happen. They don't care enough about the subject. They don't care enough about how it would work. They're not affected by it, or potentially they would come out worse off from it, and so they don't want to see it happen. It's whatever way you look at it, someone who accuses you of an ideal world but without evidence to suggest that real world versus ideal world are substantially different. Anyone that just consigns it to a fantasy or an ideal world or a perfect world without any kind of support for what they're saying is literally trying to just brush you aside because they can't be bothered. In various different ways, it comes down to them being selfish and them not caring. So, to all those people who have suggested that some of the things that I've discussed, some of the things that I've worked with, and the things that I'm continuing to want to do with this channel are only, ideal world situations and scenarios, simply put, if they are still good ideas, then come and help me work to put them out there and make them a reality. If not, then quite frankly, you've already written yourself out of any kind of situation where you would see the benefit of those things, because you aren't willing to put yourself forward for them. And quite frankly, that's a very sorry state of affairs. But what it comes down to is these things may very well still happen. We're making advancements all the time in various different ways. It might take time, it might take work, it might not happen even within my lifetime or within yours, but that does not mean that they will not happen if people are willing to put the ideas out there and work with them and work towards them. So that's what I've got to say, both in response to those people and also just in general for people who are going to consign things to ideal worlds without actually addressing them, looking at them, or wanting to put work towards them in a usually highly selfish way. But tell me, guys, what do you guys think? Firstly, what do you guys think about some of the stuff that I've been talking about? Is it all ideal world stuff? Is it all so fantastical that it'll never happen? Or is it just a case of, yes, we need to do some work towards these things. Nothing that's worthwhile ever comes easily, so why don't we just get together, have the discussions, show the world that these things can take place and work easily. They don't require as much as people think they do, even though some of these things are incredibly daunting. Or, what have you had individuals consign in regards to your ideas? What have they said of your thoughts and your plans are purely fantastical or ideal worlds, and then how have you dealt with that? Please let me know. Otherwise, if you found this video interesting or in any way useful, then please drop me a like and share this video with anyone that you think might also find it useful. And otherwise, please subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care, guys.